Barbecue. For the majority of the country, it means cooking over a live fire. But in North Carolina, it refers to one thing and one thing only: pork. Now, if you're talking about burgers, chickens, and hot dogs, that's cooking out. If you say barbecue, we expect our delicious signature meat. Today on Poor Choices, we're taking a trip to my home state of North Carolina and making the barbecue I grew up with. And because I'm an agent of chaos, I'm doing Western Carolina barbecue today, aka Lexington style, despised by the East Side Carolina boys of barbecue. We're smoking a 9-pound pork shoulder, mopping it down with a vinegar sauce, and chopping this thing up. Served alongside with some red slaw, this is the meal your cookout is missing. So pour up a glass of bourbon with me, break out a deck of cards so we can play spades and yell at one another, and enjoy a slice of my home. Starting out, let's make a quick rub for our pork. We're going to go with 1 cup of salt, half a cup of garlic powder, and make sure it's garlic powder and not garlic salt, and then 1/4 cup of a coarse black pepper. This is just an all-purpose rub mixture that should give us plenty of seasoning to cover our pork and plenty left over for other things. And if you're at home, the seasoning doesn't have to be super complex. You don't have to have a billion barbecue rubs because we're going to be getting a lot of the flavor from the mop sauce. Also, be sure to put your rub in a big enough container so you can shake it up good. I don't know why I thought this smaller one was going to work, but once it's mixed up, we can get our pork out, which today is a 9-pound pork shoulder, also called a butt. And I saw an anti-pork video the other day that just tried to prey on people's ignorance and convince them that pork butt was actual pig ass. Nobody eats pig ass. Butt refers to the colonial days when butchers would store certain cuts of pork in specialty barrels called butts. So that's all it is. Anyway, it's time to season our pork. If you see any small pieces of meat or fat hanging off, just go ahead and trim those off. Some people will do a little more trimming, removing fat that might not render down, but that's a preference thing that I'll let you experience and decide if you want to do that. And we want to season this bad boy generously. It is a big hunk of meat and it needs it. So do not be afraid to coat this thing like sand on a beach. Some people will even do an overnight dry brine, but today we're starting and finishing this within reasonable hours. Make sure you hit all the sides with seasoning too. Pat it in. If there's some seasonings at the bottom of the tray, throw that on there. And then I like to let the pork have some time to itself while I fire up the grill to let those seasonings really work in there. And you'll notice the outside begins to look wet, which means that rub is working hard. Today I'm cooking on my Traeger Timberline grill. Originally I was going to use my Kamado Joe charcoal grill, but I realized I had a ton of pellets and no charcoal. So I made a financial decision. That's purely it. Both fantastic grills. You can use any smoker, just get it stabilized, indirect cooking at 275. This pork butt is going to take about 8 to 10 hours to cook, depending on the size of the butt. I've got hickory pellets because that's what we use in North Carolina, and if you're on a charcoal grill, just get yourself some hickory chunks and you're good to go. So get your butt in the center of the grill. I'm doing this fat side down today because my heat is coming from underneath and it provides a nice barrier to keep the pork meat from turning into volcanic rock. I know some people would do fat side up, and the theory being that the fat melts, drips down, and keeps the pork moist and flavorful, but we have this mop sauce for that today, so we're gonna go fat side down. And we're gonna let this pork butt take on smoke for about 2 hours before we start applying that mop sauce. Speaking of mop sauce, we need to make our Lexington style mop sauce, which is where the real difference between Eastern and Western come in. Never mind the part of the pig that's used, it's the mop sauce. So for this, we're gonna need 2 cups of apple cider vinegar, half a cup of ketchup, 1/4 cup of brown sugar, 4 teaspoons of salt, and 2 teaspoons of crushed red peppers. And right about now is where the comments go crazy from the East Side barbecue people, and they're like, how dare you put ketchup and sugar in this sauce? I hear you, but as the title says, this is Western. You knew that like 5 minutes ago and you're still here. I lived in North Carolina for 24 years. I've eaten it all. I like it all. You will have your day on my channel, but today, this is the style. Now, some people will use white vinegar instead of apple cider vinegar, and some will even add a dash of Texas Pete hot sauce in there. It comes down to preference of what you have on hand. Give that a mixing, and that is our Lexington style mop sauce that we'll be using to add flavor and moisten our barbecue. Also, I want to say, reserve some of this for later because you're definitely going to want to pour this on top of the final chopped up pork, or double the recipe. Just trust me, you're going to want the stuff either on top or on the side. Also, you can make this mop sauce the night before and let the flavors really come together in the fridge. I would just take it out an hour or 2 before you start mopping so we're not adding cold mop sauce to our hot pork and slowing down the cook process. Speaking of the pork, it's been 2 hours and it's time to start mopping. I've got this brush here and I'm just going to go over the entire top and sides with the sauce, making sure I'm hitting all of it, and then we close the lid and walk away until an hour later. And we do this every hour until a pork butt reaches an internal temperature of 205 degrees. We're not wrapping this or anything. We're just gonna let it roll in the smoke and mop it. Now, if you're new to smoking big meats, definitely get you a good thermometer, whether it be handheld or a wireless system. I said 8 to 10 hours, but it could be as quick as 6 to 8 if it's a smaller butt, or 12 and up if it's a bigger butt. You're also gonna hit a stall where the temperature just sits at a spot and doesn't move for probably a few hours, and that's completely normal. Your butt isn't broken. Just carry on mopping the sucker every hour and you will be good. And while we're doing that, might as well take care of two other things. One is today's pork choice, a bourbon mixed with some lemonade to help pass the time, and both go well with the smokiness we're going to get from this barbecue. So cheers. The second thing we're going to make is a red slaw to go with our pork. It can be served on top like a sandwich or served on the side. It's up to you. We'll make our dressing first, which is a 2/3 cup of ketchup, half a cup of white sugar, half a cup of apple cider vinegar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, and a dash or two of your favorite hot sauce. Mix that up and then just pour it all over the top of a bag of 14-ounce pre-made coleslaw. Feel free to make your own coleslaw if you want to, but the bag stuff was just really easier here. And the cool thing about this style of slaw is that it can be left out for hours after its initial refrigeration during a cookout and not go bad like a mayo-based slaw would. Pop this in the fridge and let it hang out until it's serving time. I usually do this near the beginning of the cook so the flavors have time to really come together. Also, I might suggest doubling this recipe because it's gonna go fast. 9 hours and a lot of mopping later, our pork is done. It reached 205 degrees and I used my food thermometer to poke and make sure it was nice and tender throughout. Your thermometer should go through like butter. But once I got the pork inside, I let it rest on the counter for about 30 minutes and I just covered it loosely with some aluminum foil. Now, one thing in Carolina that we do with our pork, or at least this is the way that I grew up, is we don't necessarily serve our pork pulled. We will pull it initially to get it shredded and then we chop it up and serve it. So after you've done a good amount of shredding, get you a nice heavy knife or cleaver and just get to chopping. Then serve it up however you want. I wish they sold hush puppies out here in LA because that would have been an amazing side to go with this, but instead I did this sandwich style with some sea salt chips. And that, my friends, is Lexington style Carolina barbecue. I grew up in Raleigh, so I had the benefit of eating both styles, Eastern and Lexington, but most of my family is on the western side of the state, so I did this one first. But as mentioned, I'll get to the east side later this summer, I promise. But both represent the state well when it comes to introducing people to Carolina barbecue. Hey everybody, this is Pork Choices Kitchen. We have a Patreon link down in the description. $1 a month is all we ask for, or you can donate more. That is the beauty of Patreon. You can choose your own donation level. And then we have memberships here on YouTube. That is $2.99 a month because YouTube likes to take its cut. Both help pay for recipes at these here inflated times. I will say with the YouTube memberships, I'm trying to do a better job of releasing the videos earlier in the week. So for those of you who are like me that like to cook on the weekends, you have a little bit more lead time to buy your ingredients to cook for the weekend. But you don't have to sign up for the membership. You can do the Patreon. It's up to you. I'm not very consistent right now with getting these out on Wednesdays. In fact, it's Wednesday right now when I'm recording this voiceover. But either way, any dollar amount helps, and I really appreciate it. So I hope you enjoy this style. Some of you who have never had North Carolina style barbecue are probably confused and like, what, vinegar? Ew, that doesn't sound great. But if you enjoy salt and vinegar chips, just imagine how much more you'll like the saltiness of pork along with this vinegar sauce. It's just like almost the same, except one is a potato and the other is pork. Anyways, enjoy this recipe, and I'll see you all back here next time.